Okay, it looks like everything is good. I wasn't sure if that would. I think I got everything on my Mac set. So, let's see, play. I think that's right. Perfect. Okay. Where did my? Okay, got it. Trying to figure out all the buttons here. Okay. Okay, I think I got it all figured out. Okay, so the idea here is I've had a number of folks who are not normally Mac users with MarcEdit who are starting to work with their Mac system because that's what they have at home. Most folks in libraries tend to use PCs for cataloging, I'm assuming. They're like most places, partly because the connection is PC based. So the idea here is to walk folks through some of the things that I know about the differences between working with the Mac system and the Windows system. My idea here is I will talk a little bit about the system requirements, because it's come up a couple times, and why they work this way. I'll show you guys how to share tasks and how you can share other data. We'll quickly just run through what it looks like to take a record and go through the process on the Mac system, so that way you can see the differences in terms of how the menuing works. And then I will talk about where the primarily two big differences are between the Windows and the Mac version in terms of functionality, and then hopefully you guys have some questions. Otherwise we'll wrap up early or whenever you guys are ready. So that's kind of the plan. So a little bit of information about the Mac version. I'm gonna close my chat window here real quick, sorry. All right, a little bit about the history of the Mac. So the MarcEdit used to be in all versions 100% .NET, which meant that you had to have what was called Mono. It's an open source version of the Windows.NET framework installed. That meant that it worked very poorly on most systems that weren't Windows based because the interface, obviously on a Mac system and on a Linux system are very different. And so what was happening was the program was trying to run a Windows context inside of a Mac system, and that was causing a lot of UI issues. So around 2015, a bunch of folks asked if that could be different. I will admit I'm not a Mac user, and I still am not. I do have a Mac, but it's mostly for development purposes. And so I had some folks that asked about it. I told them if I ever got a Mac, I would work on a native version, and the community made that happen. So this is really the fact that there is a native Mac version exists only because the community asked for that to happen. So general information about getting started with a Mac, because I've had a few people wonder why they can't run MarcEdit on their versions of macOS. So the current version of the application, which I uploaded last night, is 3.2.45. The version I uploaded last night was specifically done to, again, add some parity between the Windows version and the Mac version. It was fixing a hard-to-find issue that had never been reported on the Mac side, but I wanted to go ahead and cover my bases. The program runs on a minimum of 10.2 on the macOS, so that's Sierra, up to the present. So this is actually an older version of the Mac system than Apple would prefer. As a developer, I work with, I have an Apple developer key, even though I don't use the App Store. But the guidance that we get from Apple is that primarily they don't support operating systems back past the current -1. So that would be, at this point, Mojave would be what they would prefer the programs to support. So Mojave and Catalina, because there are a lot of folks who don't upgrade their systems on the cadence that that Apple would prefer. I try and keep the program running as far back as possible. And up until Catalina was released, MarcEdit used to run on 10.10, which I think was one of the cats. Leopard, maybe snow leopard. Anyways, it ran on 10.10, and the reason for the shift actually had everything to do with Catalina. So Catalina makes use of this tool called Gatekeeper. This was a piece of software that was installed with Sierra. It was designed specifically to add a layer of security around applications that run in the Mac operating system. The Gatekeeper tool was originally designed to check signatures, and it was really more for running software that didn't initiate from the Apple Store, so outside of the Apple Store. Well, with Catalina, they modified the process for Gatekeeper, so Gatekeeper now requires software in Catalina to be notarized. Otherwise, you go through this really wonky process that requires you to know a little bit about how to tell Apple that you're okay running a piece of software. It takes a lot of steps and going into the settings to turn some stuff off. So as soon as I notarized the application, it meant that the tool had to be run within a Gatekeeper system, and so that's Sierra forward. So that means that MarcEdit's current version won't run on anything older than Sierra, and that I anticipate that those changes will likely continue as Apple tweaks some of the gatekeeping around their system. So unfortunately, I have to keep in step with the way that the operating system is being designed. So there's not really a whole lot I can do about that. So if you're running a very old version of a Mac operating system and you can't upgrade beyond what you're at because of the system being not being allowed, the new operating system not being allowed to install on the system, there's not a whole lot that I can do, unfortunately. And I imagine you probably run into other software where that becomes a problem. So MarcEdit as a native application is a combination of C# and Object-C. The tool uses a set of components that allows those two, the Object-C and the C# to talk to each other, so it kind of fuses together, so it comes as a single self-contained application. And like I said, it's been notarized and signed so that the application runs on Apple system without having issues. The user interface for the MarcEdit Mac, it much more closely aligns with Apple's UX recommendations, although there are some differences, and I'll go through what those are. So this is what MarcEdit's on the Mac looks like. It's slightly different than the Windows version, partly because some of the controls that are on Windows don't exist on Apple and vice versa. So the tool's been kind of designed with that in mind. So let's start about getting started. So when you're working with getting installed, the program lives out here on the web, just like the regular version of MarcEdit. You'll find an Apple download here, so the Mac OS. Just like the Windows version, except you don't have to pick a version. So you just go and download that version. It gives you some instructions. I'll talk about those in a minute in terms of if you're using Z39.50. So how do you install the program? So it used to be that the program didn't have an installer. It had essentially a mount that you would mount and then drag into the applications tool. To allow the program to work a little bit better and to allow also the application to associate file extensions with MarcEdit. It does have an installer now. It's a package file. So when you run the application, it runs through an installer that's also been signed and takes you through the process. And so this is what the installer file looks like when you run it. The tool should give you all the different steps and let you install into a specific destination folder or drive. So if I have multiple drives on the system, so I can install on various drives and whatnot. So it takes you, kind of guides you through those steps. So once you get the program installed, what happens next? So like the Windows program, there's a wizard that runs that will take you through the decisions that you need to make in order to make MarcEdit work for you. So if you remember, MarcEdit generally is Marc agnostic. So the thing that's going to ask you is it's going to ask you about what kind of data are you using? Are you a Marc 21 user, a Unimarc user, or something else? What's your default encoding? What kind of XSLT engine are you using? Should it force Unicode normalization? If it can't find a Unicode font, it's going to ask you to find a font. By default, Apple includes the Arial MS Unicode font. So since that's there, MarcEdit is going to go ahead and use that as a preference. And it also, if you've had an older version of MarcEdit's Mac version installed, then it will go ahead and allow you to migrate your current data to the system. So that way you can basically just start like you had been using your old version. So probably the most important question that I hear, and I've been hearing from folks since they've kind of moved to this kind of remote working environment, is how can I get my tasks running? So for a lot of folks who work with MarcEdit, especially in their offices, they have lots and lots of tasks that they've created, or maybe they have somebody who's created tasks for them, and they'd like to be able to bring those over into their Mac version. So MarcEdit's Windows and Mac versions are fairly feature compliant in terms of how they work. And so the way that you move tasks across the system is by utilizing the share configuration settings and both exporting and then importing those settings back into your system. So I'm going to try something here and see if this works. I am going to walk over to my Windows computer and I'm going to try and share the tasks that I have on that machine. I'll drop them into a OneDrive folder, so then I can come back over here and we'll start sharing again and import them so you can see kind of the process from start to finish. So 1 second. Apparently I need to figure out who am I sharing the screen with. Let's see here. How can I do this? Co-host and see if I can share my screen. 1 second. All right. Okay, so hopefully now shows my screen here. All right, so make sure that it's picking up my voice. There we go. Okay, so now I think it's sharing my screen. So so the way that you do this in MarcEdit from the Windows version, so I'll go ahead and open my Windows version here. So this was actually designed originally so that the tool would be able to understand how to share data between new computers. But it works well for sharing between different operating systems. So you go to Tools, Help, Share Configuration Settings, Application Settings, and Export. You get to choose which settings you want to export. I'm just going to do the tasks and export, and I'm going to put these into a OneDrive location that I know I can reach on my Mac system. So it should be test data. So I'm going to call these tasks export import. And so the tool goes ahead and exports the tasks. And now I should be able to find them into my folder. So the reason I put them in my OneDrive folder is because one of the things that I have found working with exporting tasks and sending them through my email is that most email systems tend to strip these out, which is problematic. So I'm now going to stop sharing. I'm going to go back to my Mac system, and we're going to see if everything's moved over there so we can import them. So stop sharing here. All right, so we're back over here. And I am going to see if my files made its way back here. Let's see, OneDrive downloads. Data to test. One second, let me move them into that folder. Okay, couldn't remember which one was which folder was allowed to see it. There it is. All right, so there's my tasks. So I've went ahead and exported my tasks. Now I'm going to go ahead and import them into MarcEdit. So inside of MarcEdit, the process for importing tasks is basically the same, except now we've got to figure out where everything is inside of MarcEdit. So again, we're dealing with the way that Apple does menuing. So MarcEdit is a program with lots of little programs. So that means that I've had to essentially build essentially a two-level menuing system inside the application. There's menus at the application level which tend to relate to the window or the tool that they're on. And then there's the shared menuing system like in a traditional Apple application. So we'll go to MarcEdit 3, share configuration settings, import settings, and then we'll go ahead and select the file. So that's going to be in OneDrive, my folder here, data to test, exported tasks, and then we'll go ahead and open those. And so the tasks have been imported into MarcEdit. So if I go to the Marc Editor, Tools, and look, we can see I have some current tasks now that have been added to the tool. So I have just that one that I pulled over from my other application. See if there's, let me quit that, make sure that's right. It should just be the one, but I'll make sure I didn't have any other ones in it. Can't remember. Yeah, just the one. So that way I can move data back and forth within the application. I can also move them. So if I had created a group within the tool, I could import those groups as well. So I actually did grab, I'm going to show you another one that I had imported yesterday from a different computer. So I'm going to go ahead and delete this one, delete that task. So I have another file, and I'm going to go ahead and import that one just to show you if you have groups within your tasks, the tool can import those groups as well. So I should have this one in my downloads folder. This one, there's a set of Windows tasks. I'll go ahead and open that one. And here we can look and see it remembers the groups as well as the other tasks that are inside. So that's how you can share tasks across your different operating systems. The same way that you share tasks, you can also share your ILS settings. So the tool separates your ILS integrations. So share configurations, integration settings. If you export and import, that'll export your OCLC APIs as well as your ILS integrations and allow you to import them into MarcEdit for use as well. Make sure there's no, okay, good. All right. So can you share your XSLT files or integration files? So yes to both. So just like when I was doing my, when I opened up my share configuration settings, you've seen there was 4 options, I believe. One for configuration settings, one for macros and tasks, one for XSLT settings, and then there was one other one. You can select all or some of those options and export them and then re-import them into the other into another system. So like I said, that was that process was designed originally for the idea that you've just gotten a new computer, and so you want to be able to just take all your settings, import them into your new computer, so that way your computer works and looks like the old version, your old system. And so you can use that same approach to import your data into MarcEdit. So a lot of folks will also probably need to use Z39.50. So MarcEdit does make use of Z39.50. It makes use of it using what's called YAS. It's a piece of software that's open source that's maintained by Intex Data to make sure that the program works with Z39.50. I require folks to install on their Mac systems the Z39.50 resources using a piece of software called Brew. It's a package manager that allows for the installation, helps to facilitate the installation of software. You can just install Brew. It's a single line command. If you haven't used it before, go ahead and click on this. If you haven't used it before, you basically copy this line into your command line tool, into your terminal, run it. It'll install Brew. From there, all you have to do is type brew install YAS, and it installs all your dependencies to YAS into your operating system. The reason why it works this way is with Catalina. When Catalina was done, before Catalina was installed, put out, I could actually use multiple versions of YAS, whether it was installed through Brew or somewhere else, because it was easy for me to use redirection to determine different locations where YAS may be installed. With Catalina, that changed. The way that the gatekeeper works, it creates a sandbox around my application. And so I have to be able to give it approved paths that potentially may be useful. And those approved paths live in the user directory. So Brew installs a symlinked version of the library and dependencies into user local lib. And so that's the path that MarcEdit's going to be looking for in order to use Z39.50. And when you've done the installation, the tool will then work where by default a couple of libraries are there, so you'll be able to then start using Z39.50 to do your queries and get data back. So how does the menuing work in MarcEdit? So MarcEdit has 2 different versions of menus. I'd mentioned this already. So there's the top level menus on the application bar. So those are shared menus. You'll find preferences, plugin managers, shared settings, link data, rules editing, and the help system. Inside of MarcEdit itself, that's where you're going to find the individual application specific menus. So from the main page, that's where you're going to find things like on the Windows version, the tools window looks a lot like the tools window on the main version of the Mac version. When you go to the Mark Tools tool, In the Mac version, the in-screen Windows application menus are going to look the same or pretty close to the same as the ones on the Windows version. Inside the MarcEditor, not all of the menus are there, but they're mostly the same. So you'll find there's a lot of parity between them. There's just maybe not exact. The other thing you're going to notice is, and so I'll just bring this up now since we're talking about menus, is that in addition to some slight menu differences, you'll notice some controls are different as well. So inside of MarcEdit, when it's doing, actually let me open up the tasks, that's a good example here. So inside of the Windows version, if you've used it, you'll know that these are all icon-based. And so there's drop-down menus, context menus. So in the Mac version, those context menus tend to be replaced with drop-down lists and buttons. And that's partly because of the differences in the way that the UIs work. And you still do have context menus inside of some of these tools. So Control-click pops up the context menus that are there. So that way you can still do those kind of things. They're just, again, tied to the way that Apple's operating system works, with some slight differences related to trying to contain the functionality that's in MarcEdit, but do it within the Apple's UI structure. All right, so you got MarcEdit installed on a Mac. You've got yourself a set of files. You'd like to now go through the process of actually using it. So the process looks and feels a lot like the way it works on a Windows system. Just some of the icons look a little bit differently. Some of the controls look a little bit different. So you're still going to break a file, and that can be done either by opening the file in the MarcEditor or through the Mac tool or Marc Tools, which I prefer. The program's still going to check the files for errors if you do it through the Marc Tools window. You're still going to open the mnemonic file for editing inside the MarcEditor. You're still going to make your edits, save them if you want to, and compile them back to Marc so that the files are finished. And so I'm just going to quickly take a file that I have here and run through the process a little bit just to show you kind of what I mean in terms of how you go through the steps. All right. So Mac version of MarcEdit. Like I said, there's the Marc Tools window here. It looks an awful lot like the Marc Tools version inside of the application. These are the character encoding options. If you would like to be able to use them, you just click Enable. The character encoding options turn on, so that way you can translate character encodings on the fly. The operations drop-down list, just looks a lot like the way that the Windows tool works. So I'm just going to go ahead and grab a file. So MRK, MRC, same style as inside of the Windows version. So MRC is the Marc files, MRK the mnemonic files, execute those. 77 records processed, edit records inside the MarcEditor. The tool looks for a Unicode version of the font, since the tool has a Unicode version of the font. In this case, it's using the Arial Unicode font. Goes ahead and gets loaded into the tool. You'll notice inside of the application, the file menu, some of the things get rearranged, but you'll find that the recent file list is there. You still have compile options, so to MarcEdit Unicode, you can still export and import data. The select records for edit, that tool that allows you to do subsets of the records, still exists inside of the tool, and it works the same. So I can import my file and then again search for a particular type of content. So let's say I wanted to find things that have what looks like years. I can do that. and then bring those records into the Marc editor. So I'm editing just those records, and then save them back into the tool. So for editing, so make changes to these records and save them back into the source file. I'm gonna close that. That's a big file. I don't want to open that one. The tool still has inside of it edit special. You'll see that the list of options inside of here is a little bit smaller, but the core elements are still here. You still got find and replace. You've got the case and the edit shortcuts, the jump tos, the edit, the 006, 008, clipboard conversion, virtual keyboards. The reason why some of the other things like copy, cut are there is because they show up over here in the top level shared menu. Apple pushes those functions at a higher level, so they don't exist inside of the the application specific piece. So this is where understanding how Apple's UI settings and recommendations work are slightly make it work a little bit different than the Windows version. Like the Windows version, your tools area is where you're going to find most of your functionality. So the tool has here linked data tools, clustering tools, your cuttering tools, generate call numbers, control numbers, RDA helper, transliteration. We also have the tasks, like I said, we have the tasking tools. We can do generation of things, URL, whatnot. We still have here the same global editing tools. They just work. They look a little bit different. Instead of having everything in a window where all of the menuing lives on the left, it now lives up on the top as kind of a, what do they call it, a tabbed window. So we can still, add fields just the same. So we can still do that. We can still delete fields the same way. So this tool still has the same global editing tools available to you. You still use remove blank lines, but you'll notice there are a couple things that are missing. So one of the things that I haven't put into the tool here is the sort field tool. It looks like it's not in the list here. So there are a couple of gaps along the way. If you look here, you can see all the reporting tools are here. So we've got the field count, so I can see how many fields are there. Just like the Windows version, if I want to see how a particular field is being used, I can click on it and it'll tell me indicator use, field and subfield use, and I can generate a report. I have the same kind of material type reports so that I can see what kind of materials are being used in my application. And just like the Windows version, everything gets managed in a log file, so that way I can see what kind of changes are being made in the application as I work through the tool. So I've tried to, in most cases, tried to capture as much of the functionality that's in the Windows version and the Mac version, though there are, like I said, a handful of gaps. Where this is really useful is inside of the tasks. So if you look inside of the tasks, these actions are all the same. Again, most of the actions here that are important are the same. So assigning groups, deleting groups. The biggest difference is you can't assign keystrokes like you can in the Windows version. And inside of the tasks, you'll see that again, the command, the control loops, so being able to add control flow elements, those exist inside the application. And all of the different tools here. So we have edit indicator tasks. They're actually more than what's here. We keep going down and seeing all of the different tasks that are out there. So we can add lots of different task types to the application. We can edit them and move them up and down like in the other tool. One of the things that's not here that you might be used to seeing in the Windows tool is the debugger that hasn't been folded over yet. So couple of small gap there. Plugins, just like the Windows version, the Mac version has plugins available to it. There are fewer of them, so like one of the plugins that gets used an awful lot inside of the Marc editor is the OCLC connection plugin. Obviously, connection doesn't run on Mac, so I can't run that plugin on the Mac version here. So we'll go ahead and close that, and I'm not going to save it. Once you integrate Z39.50, just like the Windows version, you can open the client and either through Z39.50 or SRU, run your query. Which for some odd reason is going to take a long time here, it seems like. There we go. So it says 4 records, 2 were retrieved. So this is going to happen sometimes for some reason. So there were 4 records, 2 were retrieved. There's actually 4 records there. Occasionally they just don't, the tool will time out. It's one of those things I've been working on trying to sort out why the thing times out, but you can research if you want to see what those 2 records are eventually to pull them up. I'm just going to do this one more time. So, but I can grab the records, download them into the, oh, that was weird. Well, I'll see what happened there. Should be able to download it in the catalog. I'll have to take a look and see why that went wonky there. All right, so that's that. Okay, so that's that. Let's see, where's my thing here? Let's see here. So small demonstration, I showed you how to break the file, how to open the editor. Like the Windows version, if you're working on your, say, oops, I'm not going to use that one. Say you're doing something, here where you've created something that you want to add to a task, just like the Windows version, you can copy that. And then you can go to the task editor, pick the task you want to work with, edit it, and paste it into the task. Move it to wherever you want to put it. So just like the Windows version, you can move things around like that, copy in and out. So again, trying to keep the parity of the functionality, and then the importing for Z39.50, I'll have to take a look what happened there, because that seemed to be what happens is sometimes there are certain, Z39.50 is kind of quirky within the application. If something crashes, it will actually, unfortunately, crash the program because it happens outside of the application and there's not a way for me to flag that. So I'll see what happened there, and if I need to, I'll update the program. So how's the Mac version different from the Windows version? So the primary difference is there's 2 primary differences in terms of functionality. The biggest one is something I'm going to actually show people how to use this Friday, Thursday and Friday, which is when working with non-Marc metadata, something that is called the XML profiling wizard. This is a tool that allows you to point at an XML file or a JSON file and just translate it without having to create XSLTs or any tooling that would facilitate the translation. And so that's pretty cool. I ended up building it because I was getting tired of being the person that was basically the reason why things couldn't get translated. Folks had asked me if I had a translation for a specific vendor specific XML format, and I didn't. And so this was a way to be able to help people facilitate that translation without having to wait on me to do some work or them finding somebody inside their organization to create the XSLT file. I'm trying to work really hard on getting that into the Mac version. There's just some challenges because of the way that the UX works. The UI works, which is slightly challenging on the Mac side because the controls are slightly different. The other thing that's missing from the Mac version is the script wizard. So MarcEdit has a script wizard, which allows you to create either Perl or Visual Basic scripts to automate certain parts of the application. That will never be added to the Mac version. The script wizard's designed around what's called COM. It's a automation methodology that Windows uses to make objects within an application viewable for scripting purposes. On Linux and Apple systems, they tend to be more library-based, where I need to be able to expose those through a different process. So it just isn't going to work. So that just won't never be translated. Now the Mac version does have a terminal application, so just like the Windows version, where you can run command lines in the command line tool in the command line window against MarcEdit. The Mac version does too, and so all the functionality on the Windows command line can be found in the Mac command line. So most of the things that you might automate through the script wizard, you can automate by writing your own scripts and using the command line to facilitate those processes. Otherwise, there's just a handful of differences. So as we were looking at some of the examples, you would see how menus were split up, or maybe like the debugger, which is in the Windows version for the task editor, isn't in the Mac version yet. So there are a handful of things that are missing from the Mac version to the Windows version. Some of those are because the process to put them into the Mac version wouldn't make sense, because the technology maybe being used is more Windows specific. Other times it's more just because it could be just an oversight, because I hadn't realized it wasn't there. Other times it's more of a UX UI issue, where I'm trying to sort out how to take something that's in a Windows environment and translate it into a Mac environment within the constraints that I have of the different UI elements. And some of that means me having to do some research, because again, I'm not a Mac user. And there are some interesting ways that Apple's UI thread works that's different from Windows. And in fact, one of the things that I've had to do for MarcEdit is actually create a application-specific event pump so that the UI in Windows, or the UI in MarcEdit, is more thread aware. Apple uses a shared UI structure, and so the UI layer isn't thread safe, and I need it to be thread safe inside of my application. And that's actually why sometimes, like with the Z39.50, if there's an error, that could potentially crash the program, because the application is working within this event pump that I've created to make the ability to interact with the user interface possible by making the work within MarcEdit thread safe in a way that's not inherently found in the way that Apple's UI threading model works for the user interface. So there are some differences, and those are things that I still kind of have to sort out. And since I don't work in a Mac as often as I work on a Windows side, I tend to set aside development time to work on each of the different pieces. So that's the stuff that I was going to talk about. We have time. I was hoping that folks would have specific questions, but if you don't, that's fine. We can, I know for the most part, there were just some folks that were interested in learning a little bit more about getting their system set up. And hopefully this would be helpful, partly so that as we go through doing more of these web sessions that I'm doing, it'll be easier for folks to translate between what they see on the screen on the Windows side to what they can do on the Mac side, and and I'll try and make sure that I tell people if there's something that I know doesn't work on the Apple side versus knowing that it'll work on both, the assumption being it would work on both unless I say something specifically about it. So if there are any questions, let me know and we can answer them. Otherwise, hopefully this has been useful, and you guys will be able to work a little bit easier on your Mac version of MarcEdit. And I'll just wait a second to see if anybody has anything. Type it in the chat. Well, I'm not seeing anything specific. Or showing up. So I guess that assuming that means that either I've answered the questions or I didn't ask the right ones. But I guess then that means that we'll call it good. So I'm going to turn off the recording and close the meeting. So hopefully this was useful for folks.